All right, today we have one of my very favorite guests, my mother, and she didn't want to do this, and nobody knows that she did because she was just too nervous about it. I don't know why, because my mother is sort of a celebrity. When she was in high school, she won the Betty Crocker Award. So that tells me she was a pretty good cook and pretty awesome. Every talent I have is from my mom. My mom is super talented, and she has passed that down to all of her daughters. She is a great cook, a great seamstress, a great person, and I'm so happy to have her today. Now, I found out something about this recipe that I never knew. This is meatloaf that we're making today, and it's not just that thick brick of a meatloaf that you've had at some places. It's super juicy and delicious, and your family is gonna love this. And I thought this recipe was from my grandmother, who always made it when we went over there for Sunday dinners. But my mom said that
it's my grandfather.
So my great-grandfather. Our great-grandmother was from Germany.
Yes.
And she cooked a lot and was a great cook, but my grandfather actually was famous for his meatloaf and chili, right? Didn't he have some great chili recipe? So this recipe today is from him, and so how awesome to have my mom here to make it. And I think if you try this recipe, this is gonna be a new family favorite for you too. It's awesome. Okay, so Mom, tell us what's in it.
Well, we start with ground beef and ground ham, and usually I use half of
Half
the
as
ground
much?
beef.
Half as much ham as ground beef.
Right.
And you can make this any size. If you have a huge family, then use more ground beef. This is going to be a pretty large meatloaf, and we're actually using 2 pounds of ground beef and 1 pound of ham, and that will make a large meatloaf.
Yeah, really.
My mother just has 2. She probably uses a cup of meatloaf.
A pound of meatloaf is all.
For her and my dad.
A pound of hamburger.
And then they portion it up, and it lasts a month. But so that's your proportion. You want half as much ham as hamburger, and you can't buy ground ham in the grocery store. So what do you usually use?
I usually just buy those ham steaks and cut them up and put them through my grinder.
Okay. Now my KitchenAid has an attachment where you can grind the meat, and if you live by me, come on over. You can use it. I'll help you grind meat. If you don't, find a friend who has a KitchenAid with a meat grinder attachment. Or my grandma, didn't she have like a hand meat grinder? Yeah, so maybe you could find one at Goodwill or DI.
Another good way to get your ham is after Thanksgiving, Easter, when you have ham and you have all those scraps left, cut them off, grind them up, put them in your freezer. You can have them in some of your breakfast scrambled eggs. You can always be ready to make another meatloaf.
I can guarantee you my mom has a bag of this in her freezer now.
I do.
Okay, so what else is in it?
There is tomato sauce, Worcestershire sauce, eggs. This is pepper and
Onion
powder and garlic powder and crushed crackers, saltines.
Okay, so for this large meatloaf, we're using 2 eggs. When my mom does a pound, we use 1 egg. We usually use just 1 package, like one of those sleeves of saltine crackers, but because it's a bigger one, we use 2, and we crushed them up. So she just rolled them in a Ziploc, rolled them with a rolling pin, crushed them up. Now you can see they're not super fine. A lot of people make theirs with breadcrumbs, which makes a super dense, compact, scary looking loaf of meat. But this is not that. It is a super delicious, light, fluffy, unbelievably tasty meatloaf. And so we have the crackers a little bit larger, not all crunched up like breadcrumbs. This is going to be a meatloaf you're going to love. And we also have the stuff for the sauce, which is going to be what goes on top.
So it's tomato sauce and kitchen bouquet, and then after you put that over it, you sprinkle onions on the top and bake it.
Now, you probably don't know what kitchen bouquet is, because I thought they stopped selling it probably in the 50s. I thought it was only for old women, and how I thought it was made was that they took burnt toast, scraped it off, added water, put it in a bottle for kitchen bouquet. But I found out today from my mother that's not what it is, what it tastes like, or what it's for.
I think it enhances the taste by coloring it different, so you have a better color, kind of a reddish brown, and you don't have the acidy tomato taste. You have something that's milder and looks better.
And we want our food to look good, because who would want to eat it if it didn't?
Okay, well, let's start with put our ground beef in. I did wash my hands, by the way. And our
No COVID.
ground ham. And I'm going to mix that just a little bit before we put our other stuff in, so it can get down in those places. And we'll start with our eggs.
You just throw it in there.
And our tomato sauce, half a cup of tomato sauce about.
Was that half a cup or half a can?
It was.
I guess that's the
That's
same.
the same.
Good to know.
And this was
Worcestershire
Worcestershire.
was about a tablespoon or more.
I think just that. And then our spices. And
The secret ingredient.
I think we'll mix this.
Do you want to put this in first?
Our secret ingredient. Let's put.
I'm making her measure today because she usually just dumps some stuff and then it's super hard to give someone the recipe. So today we're actually measuring and making sure. So that was 2 tablespoons. If you like it less spicy, put less in. If you're more spicy, which she probably would have been, you can put more in.
And this mix it's kind of moist. It's not sloshy, gooey or anything, but moist. And then the crackers will take up that moisture. And so the next part is the one I enjoy the most.
Now, if you are opposed to touching meat, you can mix this in your KitchenAid, like with the dough hook, but it doesn't mix near as well as by hand. And then you can say this is handmade because you smashed it by hand.
You just want to get it all mixed up so you don't have cracker lumps everywhere or in one place.
Or ham lumps, or any kind of lumps in the spices. You want to mix that really well and smash it around. It's really good for like anxiety. You can really get some feelings out smashing that meatloaf if anyone's bothering you that day.
If you're tired of being
Home
cooped
alone.
up with your children.
Or your husband.
It's almost like mixing bread because you need to turn it and see what's on the bottom and just okay. I think that's looking pretty good.
All right, so it's all mixed up, and the next thing we want to talk about is a pan to cook it in. And we were just discussing, my grandma used to make hers in an aluminum pan, and I was super jealous that my sister got the pan, but ha ha ha, the tomato sauce eats the pan, and the pan became pitted, because of the tomato sauce. So what did you say you use?
I use a stainless steel, it's a frying pan actually, but it has a lid and it's a little bit taller, but it does just fine in that.
And I'm going to use my Dutch oven, which I love and love to cook everything in. This is a good investment. I have used, and I was just talking to my mom, I used to use just a glass baking dish 9 by 13. One time I took it out, set it on the oven, and it shattered, which ruined a bunch of delicious meatloaf.
And I had the same thing happen years and years ago.
So probably don't use a glass pan. Stay away from aluminum. Even if, I like this because it also has a lid. Now if you use aluminum to cover it, you'll see it'll eat holes in your aluminum that you covered it with to bake. So a pan with a lid is what you probably would like to use.
And not aluminum.
Not aluminum. So we're gonna put this mother meatloaf in. Literally mother.
And we're just going to have to shape it a little bit. It's kind of big.
Now, I'm going to tell you that we make this meatloaf every Valentine's Day, and we call it Love Dinner. And of course, we shape the meatloaf into a heart. But if it's just a regular day meatloaf, you can just...
It's an oval, kind of.
Just make it.
Can't get my hands in it just right.
Some smaller meatloafs that people make, you've seen them put them in those bread pans. I'm telling you, that is a loaf of meat, which is disgusting. But this is a delicious dinner, not like crummy meatloaf. Another thing that is delicious about this meatloaf is that there's no ketchup involved. There should be no ketchup in a delicious dinner. This was like a special dinner we had. It wasn't like, oh, I don't have anything, let's dump some junk from the fridge in and make a meatloaf. This is a delicious dinner that you could serve to your guests, and they would love it. We had a person that we went over to their house. I was actually related to them once. And she said, hey, do you guys want to stay for dinner? We have meatloaf. And of course, my children who love meatloaf were like, yeah, let's stay. We cut into it. I think she was cleaning her fridge out and added some hamburger, because there were like green beans and lima beans and things that I didn't even know. And my kids are like, can we eat outside? And I'm like, sure, because I knew they were going to bury it in the yard. So this is not that kind of meatloaf.
This meatloaf, I think it's called a ham loaf too, but my grandfather used to make this. My grandmother was a good cook, but my grandfather made this. And that was one of the things that we'd like to have at their house because it had ham in it. So that was a favorite of ours when we were younger, because then Mother used it. I've never seen a recipe. She just made it. And then...
Which was super interesting. When my sisters watched this, I'm sure we didn't know that. We always thought this was Grandma's recipe, but obviously it was our great-grandfather's. So that was super fun to find out.
Okay, for the sauce, we're just going to put in a can and a half of the tomato sauce and probably a can of water, or maybe a little bit more.
Do you want more? Is that good?
Oh, wait just a minute. Okay. I don't know. And we will add our kitchen bouquet.
Now we started with probably a tablespoon. My mom might add more or less, depending on the color. So it's really a color thing, and then that makes it taste just right.
It's kind of a good color.
Okay.
And I'll put just a little bit more water. And you can't get too much water. Well, using this though, you don't lose water.
Yeah. So
it'll probably be fine then.
Yeah, that's another thing about cooking it in this Dutch oven. It keeps it super moist. And then also,
and there's a lot of liquid in it, but when I slice it, we like to have a little bit of the sauce or tomato
It's almost
sauce.
like a little bit of gravy.
Yeah.
Now, we didn't put any onions in the meatloaf because some of us are not onion lovers. But if you wanted to chop some up super tiny and put it in, you could. I like it this way because then if you don't love onions, you can pick it off.
And just sprinkle them over the top, even down into the gravy because they're good in that gravy stuff too. And that's it.
Okay, so that was probably a half of an onion, maybe?
Yes.
Sliced thin, about a half of an onion. And you can do more or less depending on how much you like it. Also, another thing that we didn't say that I thought might be important is my mom likes to use hamburger that is what?
You can't use real lean hamburger.
Right.
It has to have a little bit of fat in it.
I like to use the medium, and my mom likes to use, is it 80-20?
80 something.
Yeah, 80-20, because that makes 100. And she likes that the best. I like the middle one because. All right, and then you just put the lid on, and we're gonna put it in the oven and bake it at 350 for about an hour and a half. If it's a smaller loaf, about an hour. So, see you in an hour and a half. So that's it. That's what it looks like when it comes out of the oven. You see all that delicious sauce all around? It's thickened up, even though it seemed a little watery when we first poured it in. And it smells so delicious, I can't even tell you. So since my great-grandfather's passed, and so is my grandmother, my mother is now the queen of meatloaf. She's the one who makes it. It's always so delicious. All of my girls have learned to make it, and it's always a special dinner of Grandma's meatloaf when we have it.
And one of the best things I like about it is the leftovers. I love meatloaf sandwiches. Just slice it, put a little El Pato on it, fry it in a pan. That is delicious.
It does make the best sandwiches ever. Just want to thank my mom for being on. She's my favorite. And I love and appreciate her, and I would have no talents if it were not for her. Please remember to subscribe, push the notification button, leave a comment if you want to. And not only do my grandchildren watch, so does my mother. So write something nice.